How to analyse unseen prose for Cambridge AS level English literature. Did you know that over 60% of Cambridge AS level literature students lose marks on unseen prose? It's one of the toughest exam tasks because you're handed a passage you've never seen and asked to analyse it in minutes. But here's the secret: unseen prose is formulaic. In this video, I'll reveal my examiner-approved 3-step method, dissect 2 real passages, including one from Evelyn Waugh and Charlotte Brontë, and show you how to avoid the traps that cost students marks. Let's turn prose analysis into your superpower. Most students fall into 3 traps with unseen prose. 1. Lack of structure, jumping into random techniques without grasping the passage's core purpose. 2. Feature spotting, listing metaphors or dialogue without explaining how they shape meaning. 3. Ignoring narrative voice. Overlooking how perspective, first person versus third person, manipulates the reader's empathy or judgment. Sound familiar? Don't panic. My method fixes this in minutes. Step 1. Identify narrative voice, tone, and theme. Narrative voice. Who tells the story? A first-person narrator, like Jane Eyre, creates intimacy, while third-person omniscient, e.g. Waugh, offers irony by revealing hidden motives. Tone. Is it satirical, melancholic, or defiant? How does the writer's word choice signal this? Theme. Look for binary oppositions, e.g. freedom versus oppression in Jane Eyre, or recurring motifs, e.g. decay in aristocratic settings. Step 2. Analyse key techniques. Focus on 3 pillars: characterization, dialogue, internal thoughts, or symbolic descriptions, e.g. Mrs. Beaver's rigid rules equals obsession with appearances. Structure, sentence length, short, due tension, time shifts, or juxtaposition, e.g. drawing room formality versus chaotic hall conflict in Waugh. Language, diction, e.g. mad cat, adds animalistic dehumanization, and imagery, e.g. Louis XV cabinet in sacking, fragile aristocracy. Step 3. Explain the effects. It asks, why this technique? Why here? For example, Waugh's satire. The omniscient narrator's detachment critiques the upper class's performative rituals. Bronte's simile. Mad Cat isn't just descriptive, it reflects Victorian fears of female autonomy. Pro tip: use phrases like "this exposes" or "this forces the reader to link techniques to themes." Example 1. Evelyn Waugh's "A handful of dust." Excerpt: after luncheon they went to the drawing room. It was one of Mrs. Beaver's rules that there should be no coffee served in the dining room, and there was another rule that no one should sit down before she did. That day she had to pass through the hall, where the decorators were having a row with her son. Tony stood looking at a Louis XVI cabinet that was still in its sacking. Step 1. Narrative voice, tone, theme. Narrative perspective, third person omniscient. The narrator's clinical detachment contrasts with Tony's passive observation, highlighting his emotional disconnection. Tone, satirical with understated tension. Words like rules and row clash, mocking the absurdity of rigid social norms. Theme, the emptiness of aristocratic life versus the chaos of authenticity. Step 2. Key techniques. Characterization, Mrs. Beaver's obsession with rules, no coffee in the dining room, symbolises the suffocating performativity of her class. Tony's silence and fixation on the covered cabinet, a status symbol hidden in sacking, suggest his disillusionment. Structure. The passage shifts abruptly from the controlled drawing room to the chaotic hall, mirroring the instability beneath aristocratic facades. Language. The Louis XV cabinet, a relic of French aristocracy, wrapped in sacking, becomes a metaphor for the decaying, fragile nature of this social order. Step 3. Effect. Waugh uses satire to critique the aristocracy's obsession with appearances. The covered cabinet symbolises how their wealth and status are merely decorative, hiding moral decay. The juxtaposition of Mrs. Beaver's strict rules and the unresolved row in the hall exposes the fragility of their constructed world. Example 2. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, excerpt, "I resisted all the way, a new thing for me, and a circumstance which greatly strengthened the bad opinion Bessie and Miss Abbott were disposed to entertain of me." Hold her arms, Miss Abbott, she's like a mad cat. Step 1. Narrative voice, tone, theme. Narrative perspective, first person. Jane's raw, defiant voice immerses the reader in her marginalisation. Tone, defiant and visceral. Words like resisted and mad cat clash with the adult's authoritarian tone. Theme, power dynamics and female agency in a patriarchal society. Step 2. Key techniques. Characterization. Jane's physical resistance, "I resisted all the way," contrasts with Miss Abbott's dehumanising dialogue, framing rebellion as a moral act in a repressive system. Structure. Brontë uses short, choppy sentences, "hold her arms," "mad cat," to mimic the violence of the scene, forcing the reader to experience Jane's trauma. Language. The simile, "like a mad cat," reduces Jane to an animal, reflecting Victorian biases against assertive women. The word "mad" pathologizes her resistance, critiquing societal gaslighting. Step 3. Effect. Bronte's first-person narration forces readers to empathise with Jane's defiance, challenging Victorian norms. The animalistic simile isn't just descriptive, it's a societal judgment. By framing Jane's rebellion as madness, Brontë exposes how patriarchy vilifies female autonomy, common pitfalls to avoid. Summarising, don't narrate the plot, analyse the writer's craft. Don't say, "Jane fights with Miss Abbott." Instead say, Brontë uses physical struggle to symbolise Jane's psychological battle against oppression. Overcomplicating structure. Focus on how structure shapes meaning, not just labelling it. Example. Waugh's abrupt shifts between settings mirror the aristocracy's fractured identity. Generic statements replace vague claims with contextualised effects. Don't say, "the dialogue shows tension." Instead say, "Miss Abbott's command, 'hold her arms,' dehumanises Jane, reflecting systemic oppression." Now you are ready to conquer unseen prose. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment with your trickiest prose passage and I'll analyse it in a future video. Let's get you that A.